First of all, my name is Kenneth Schreiber. It's S-C-H-R-E-I-B-E-R. I'm at the law offices of Schreiber and Schreiber. The address is 37 Sacanassa Crossroad. That's the road you're on today. This is 140. Person to my left is Chris Turco, who also works in our office. And I want to introduce him to you. He may have his name on this case in some ways. He certainly is going to contribute in many, many ways. We are here today to speak about an incident which occurred on September 10th of this year, 2023, which involved residents at the so-called Dean Estates Apartments, which are located on Oakland Avenue in Cranston. I want to thank, first of all, people that were able to come out today. Many of the residents could not come. These are working class people, most of them. Some are retired. They're solid blue-collar people, I would say 90% of them, and many of them live paycheck to paycheck, so they couldn't be here today. On that particular day, we had a lot of rain. We can't, I can't stand here and represent to any of you today that it didn't rain that day and there was a horrible flood. But the reality was, this was not an aberration. This was a consistent set of events. This was just the ultimate disaster this particular day. It wasn't the first time residents have seen their apartments flood at these particular addresses. And we want to call your attention to the companies, the entities that were involved not only in this particular flood, but also the ones before it. In particular, we're talking about Wynn Companies, which is stationed out of Boston, I believe a $137 million company, which manages the property. There is a new owner associated with these particular properties as well, but also all of their agents that are involved with Dean Estates Apartments. And I have I would say a special place in my heart for this, because I was the paper boy when they built these properties 40 some odd years ago, so I'm showing my age a little bit. I've been in these apartments long before there were any imperfections or problems associated with the property. We begin with the fact that the properties, in our position, is that they were not maintained, that the vast majority of residents that live there have had problems with flooding in the past, that almost all of these complaints were registered with the management company. Every one. Some got noticed, even some got fixed, most got ignored. And there have been other issues regarding this property in the past regarding maintenance. I only know that because I've had prior issues regarding this property where an actual, not that this has anything to do with this, an actual porch in the back, literally somebody was on the porch, and you would think it was safe, collapsed years ago. All right, I can't talk about other things because of conflict of interest, because of attorney-client privilege, but that's the reality. Different owner then, different management company, same place. The history with respect to these two properties is that they were not well maintained and neglected, if you will. So we're here today to enlighten the public, first of all, and thank them for just the fact that so many people are aware of this, so many people are aware that people have been displaced, and the stories are horrendous. I use the word horrific as well, but horrendous because not only have people lost everything they had, when you talk about everything, we're talking about a dog or a cat. We're also talking about tens of thousands of dollars of value of property, materialistic things, which you hope can be replaced, but there's no insurance for 90% of these people. And for the other 10% that there wasn't enough. But even people who had their own sentimental things that may not be materialistic in nature, but just as important to them, They lost those. What value did it put on that? Most of this was narrowed and focused to the bottom floor. They talk about it floor number 1, but it's really almost a basement type of thing if you've ever been in these buildings. And specifically, in terms of some of the people that lived there, they almost lost their lives. I mean, it was just a horrific event that occurred so quickly. We understand that. But the reality was, with the correct maintenance and the standards which needed to be in effect on that particular date, we wouldn't even be here today. We'd be fixing some leaks and not basically having people's lives turned upside down. And I want to talk about these individuals without naming them. I mentioned about the materialistic things. Some of the value of their property might be $5,000 is all they had. Might be less in terms of the materialistic things. Some, as I told you, tens of thousands of dollars. A particular woman who lived with her son there, who's been displaced. Her son now lives somewhere else because she had nowhere to go. People were put into apartments, and the management company would not give them an indefinite date where their property they'd go back to. Some have gone back to the property in one of the buildings. Some haven't. But what I'm getting at is they actually, I'm talking about they being the management company, would not authorize them to stay. Well, we'll give you a week, let us know how things go. It was like day to day. They'd have to move from one place to the next. They weren't treated well. There's no compassion. You know who was treated well? The owners. The owners were treated well. And the management company was treated well. Why? Oh, they had their public adjuster there. They have insurance. They have insurance. They had a building that was dilapidated, that should have been condemned, in my opinion. We don't know that for sure. I haven't had an engineer look at this place yet. But the reality is, should have been condemned by the city, we think, long ago, or at least fixed up so that it was livable. And instead, they're getting a new building, essentially, because of all the improvements that are going to be made, because they have insurance. So these are victims. And I can't put a face on everybody. There are 27 that I have now. I believe we're going to have 30 before the end of next week. Some people were out, one person was out of the country. But all of their lives have been impacted tremendously. And we're here today to talk about what happened after as well. So you're aware that there were meetings. You're aware that the tenants showed up. Almost everybody was given their rent back for the month, which is a noble thing, an admirable thing to do. But many of them were offered these cards. I don't want to call them a credit card, but they've got some money on there. And these were desperate people. Some of them couldn't afford, I don't want to say they were homeless, but they didn't know where their next meal was coming from. They're retired, some of them. So ultimately, to get the card, the company required them to sign some form of a release, which we haven't seen yet. And some of my clients, and I represent everybody as far as I know, along with Mr. Turco, signed these because they were desperate people at desperate times. So they signed these releases. Just the fact that the release was there is unconscionable. Mm-hmm. It's just unconscionable to put a desperate person, say, look, we want to help you. Here's $250. I think some people got $500. Sign this, and you're all set. These are not lawyers. These are lay people. These are lay people, and this is everybody, I think, in the audience are, with the exception of Mr. Turco and myself. And what do? Oh, they're desperate. They sign. It's unconscionable. When I saw a response from Wynn today, I thought very well written, company aligned response, how compassionate and concerned they are. Well, if they feel that way, I'm talking to them right now. why don't you throw these releases away and rip them up and give these people the opportunity to seek justice and not hide behind their desperation to sign a release, which we think is going to be null and void in the first place. Well, why even argue that point? So we're here today to tell you that we're going to be pursuing, my office, an action against anyone who has any liability with respect to this. We may have to go back in time, but the reality was the property, I'm not sure of the date, was purchased, thank you, somebody in the audience knows what I'm thinking, was purchased somewhat recently, and we're not sure of what the obligations of the recent purchase was versus the prior owner. We don't know if there were what's called indemnification agreements, which essentially would shield the new owner, at least in their mind, because they bought the property in such a particular condition. We assume, like any other real estate property, specifically, in this case, residential apartments, that it was inspected, but we'll find that out if we have to litigate. The reality here is that of all the people that I represent, they don't have the time to litigate this case for 10 years or 5 years or 2 years. Some do. Some have moved on. We're looking for the people that are responsible, the agents that are responsible. And by the way, many of these people were misled by the agents. They're representatives of forgetting the name again. What's the name of the place again? Yeah. Of the management property. The representatives said everything's fine there. They were actually told this when it wasn't. These were knowingly misrepresentations on their part. Falsehoods. Falsehoods. Just wrong. So we're looking at everyone involved in this who has any exposure in this to come forward and take the right side in this. And we're not alleging that anyone did anything that was evil, criminal at this point. But when you make misrepresentations, you should be accountable. And in this particular situation, their agents made misrepresentations. We relied on those misrepresentations, and we were thrown under the bus when this flood happened. So now everybody's in the same boat today that I represent. They're displaced. They need help. Their lives are literally turned upside down. And I read someone shared with me today a response from the management company. But the reality is, if they really want to be compassionate about this, they should start getting involved in negotiations immediately, forthwith. Some of the people that I represent are also elderly. They're still displaced. They're still in hotels. You know, they don't have 5, 10 years to go forward. But I will tell you this. If they don't want to work with us because we want to work with them, we will seek justice, and quickly. And we will do all we can to make sure that my clients are made whole, every single one of them, not only for the losses that they have that are materialistic, but also those that are intangible, also those that basically cause their lives to be completely changed dramatically for the worse. So having said that, I'll open, thank you for listening to my remarks, open the floor up to any questions. Yes?
So are you filing any lawsuits today, or are you trying to work with the people involved before going to that point?
Well, if we file a lawsuit, what happens is that usually is there's time to answer the case, you get involved with discovery, and you're talking about a lengthy period of time, especially with almost 30 plaintiffs involved. And we want to try to avoid that. So yes, the answer to your question is we would welcome discussion, negotiation regarding every one of the individuals that I represent and talking about what the value of their claims are actually worth, because time is a factor. Some don't have the time that others have. Any other questions? Yes?
When did the sale of the property happen?
I believe it was 9 months ago. We don't have the exact record, but the primary contact for all of these individuals was the management company,
Which hasn't changed.
which hasn't changed, correct. Correct. And many of the leases were old, so we have old leases. People were in this place for 15 years, some people, some 5. But there's a common denominator. Lack of maintenance. Everywhere you go, the common denominator is they didn't maintain the property. And they misrepresented. That's the other common denominator. I want to reiterate that. They misrepresented, their agents, whether it's themselves or their agents, they misrepresented the condition of the property. It was horrendous, the condition. Yes?
Have you reached out to any of these people yet, or are you going to reach out after this?
Well, no, we have reached out to the management company.
Have they responded?
The only response I saw, again, was the public document that was showed to me today. But no, they haven't contacted my office. There was an acknowledgement within that document that they are aware of our representation. So we say to them today, if they want to truly do the compassionate thing, I hope they'll call me tomorrow. And trust me, this is a priority in our office. We'll set up a meeting on Monday, anytime they want, and cancel whatever needs to be done to make sure that the people in this audience that have showed up and the people whose voices I hear that can't be heard today, trust me, all of their interests can be addressed. Yes.
You mentioned,
Go ahead.
you mentioned that the releases that were signed to receive those credit cards, you believe they'll be null and void. Why?
Well, if we have to go to court, one of the first things that we will do is, not everybody signed those, first of all. I want to say 6, 7 signed them, and some walked away. Interestingly, no copies. I don't have one. Client never got one. I still don't have one to this day. So there's an ulterior motive here, which is, we'll give you the card worth $250 if you sign the release, and then you don't, basically, they purchase a suit, they have no liability anymore. We don't take that position. We take the position that when a person signed that, they were not of sound mind. The desperation that they had at that time for that money meant that they could not sign that. But we hope we don't even reach that. I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody. I don't even know who the individual was or individuals were that presented that to any one of my clients. What I'd like to do is see if the companies involved in this case will come forward and show real compassion and rip them up. And then start talking about the individual claims that everyone in this room, as well as probably another 20 people, 15, 20 people have as well. And we can talk about them individually. We need to work this out. We need to work this out quickly. But if we can't, we're prepared to go forward just as quickly.
So what would you call working it out? Like, what is the specific?
Well, you're asking me in terms of negotiations. That's what I'm talking about. I have basically a brief summary from every one of my clients, with the exception of a few, as to what their losses are. And some of them are out of pocket. Some of them are used things. For instance, some person lost like 3 or 4 Apple computers. Some lost a lot of sound systems was in the audience. That's $10,000s of dollars. And all these things can be traced. We understand we've got to prove some things. But some lost their lives in terms of just their clothing. And they didn't even have money to buy clothes. It was that bad, let alone go somewhere to stay. So we would like to sit down and see if there's a good faith effort, because that's all we're asking for is good faith. A good faith effort on any of the entities that are involved in this matter, in which all of them would sit down and discuss each claim individually and see if we can, when I say work out, resolve the claim. And some are desperate right now. Some are desperate right now. Yes, sir.
You say any entities involved. Would you be willing to name some of the other entities beyond just Wayne Management?
Well, I mentioned that the ownership changed. which was, I believe, like Markowitz owned it. But there's a prior owner before that, so I need to ascertain whether or not they had any liability as well. If it takes suing everybody in the chain of title, if you will, we'll do that as well.
And just to be clear, Merkowitz is the current owner?
That's our understanding, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? I want to just enlighten everybody that, first of all, my office is 781-2000, and my email is ken@schreiberlegal.com, and that's probably the best way to communicate with me is the email address. I would hope that within 30 days, if not sooner, that we hear from Wynn or Markowitz or somebody who has some authorization to talk about the claims of everybody here today and not here today. And we'll see how that plays out. But I invite you, certainly on a bi-weekly basis, to send me an email and ask me whether or not there have been any developments in the case. I can assure you any negotiations are done from our side in good faith. They will be done privately. We do not negotiate in the media, never have. That's always been our relationship with the media. However, the public has a right to know, and we appreciate the fact that the media is here to cover this story that we think has real concern not only to the individuals here today, but also to the general public as well. And we appreciate that. If not for media coverage, this is the kind of story that gets shied away and swept under the rug. I was trying to figure out what I was doing, but swept under the rug, and then you don't hear about it. And then instead, you've got 30 people whose lives have been turned upside down, and nobody is paying attention. So on behalf of all of them, we greatly appreciate the fact that you're here today, and we'll continue to cover this story in the future.
Briefly, you mentioned that there are some improvements that are being made to the building because they got insurance money. There were crews there earlier today. Have you confirmed if they are renovating the building and why?
My position on this is essentially first to see if Wynn and or their subsidiaries, agents, the owner, the prior owner, if they want to come forward and talk about trying to negotiate these people's claims instead of talking about liability. And I believe we'll find out within 60 days, if not 30 days, about, if not by next week, whether that's going to happen. One can negotiate without admitting wrong. Okay, that's an important thing to remember in law, which is that as long as you make a victim whole, anytime you sign these releases, whether it's a car accident, a slip and fall, something even worse, almost always there's a provision within the document which says we're not admitting, the defendant's not admitting any liability. It's always in there. And of course, the plaintiff doesn't care because they've been made whole. So we can negotiate in good faith and see if there's a real vested interest on their part in not having a long drawn-out court case, which so many plaintiffs, there may be 2, 3, 4 entities, we don't know. But the reality here is, unfortunately, some of my clients are of elderly age and can't wait that long and in desperate for money now as we speak. So we hope that they'll come forward. If I don't hear from anybody, there's no deadline. I don't negotiate that way. But obviously, at some point in time, if I haven't heard from anybody with some authorization that they're interested in pursuing this with us and see if we can meet in the middle and resolve this, then obviously the next step is to file suit. And again, I want to reiterate, thank you for the media for keeping this, coming here today, number one, but also keeping this at the forefront, because without your attention to this, many people in here probably would be getting ignored. And I know they won't be ignored after this appears on your respective station or your respective journalistic journals or newspapers or publications. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Yes?
I just have one statement, I guess. I spoke to the mayor via phone earlier today, and our building was condemned, but there is construction going on. So on a condemned building, why would you be doing replacement windows construction in there. I spoke to people personally in there. They're trying to get the place ready, quote unquote. I just wanted to throw that out there because on a condemned building, you shouldn't be touching it at all. And all of us, it took 8 weeks, 9 weeks to get the okay to go in, but you had to sign a waiver to go in, and whatever you left behind, you signed off to the property managers. It was unsafe. The smells were horrific. I believe 90% of the people did not sign that waiver. Another ploy, such as the credit card, sorry for your inconvenience, but here's a $500 gift card.
You mean the release, Wayne?
The release,
Yeah.
excuse me. So I just don't understand how a building's condemned. The city hall was closed today because of the holiday, observational holiday, but I did speak to the mayor, and he said there should be no construction going on to get that place up and running.
So I should identify who this individual is. So this is Wayne Walker, and Wayne has been one of the, I'll call him one of the leaders in the case, and I say leader because he's a very compassionate man as well, and he certainly respects everybody, not only in the building, but anybody he's come basically in interaction with. But we wouldn't be here today without his efforts and how he coordinated things. And there are other people as well that we want to thank as well. But that's all right. He's really up to date on this, and appreciate everything he's done, not only for everybody in the room, everybody not here, but also for myself. Thank you. Anything else? Yes. Go ahead.
I know that there is a ongoing lawsuit between the city and state, the city of Cranston and the state of Rhode Island. They're being represented by the Attorney General of Rhode Island, and that is being filed by Wynn Management. Is that going to affect this process?
Well, that's a great question. So I want to answer it this way. There was some discussion how to resolve this, and if suit was the only way, because we think that Wynn may get the city involved in this as well. And we're not going to make any comments on the city except that they've been supportive. I mean, there's no doubt that they've been supportive of our position. The one thing that I'll say, and I'm not here to practice law in front of the cameras, but there's a phrase, it's called joint tortfeasors, okay? If you're a joint tortfeasor, meaning it's more than one, joint more than one, basically you're going to be liable for the damages. So we hope that Wynn, in particular, and the owner, will take the position, we have some significant exposure here, rather than have a protracted litigation in the case. Let's see if we can work it out. There's no question in our mind that there have been misrepresentations. That's one way of looking at it in terms of the property and its condition. And the second is that because of the lack of maintenance, there's negligence as well. So we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to prove that one way or the other. But we really want to set the wheels in motion for protracted litigation, because all of our clients would just like to be made whole. All of my clients would just like to be made whole. Anything else, anyone? Thank you for coming. Oh, yes, ma'am. No, don't apologize. Why don't you identify yourself for the record? This is one of the nicest tenants in the building. No disrespect to anybody else. What is your name?
Jamie.
Go ahead. Janie, your last name?
Heidi.
Spell that for the cameras.
D-A-Y.
Okay, go ahead, Janie.
I'd just like to share that we've waited, of course, an extended period of time to be able to go in and get what could be taken out of our apartment. I was told last Wednesday that I could take it out Thursday. The office was closed Friday, so I was not allowed to go in. Saturday, Sunday, and 3 hours on Monday. And I did that the best I could. However, they already told me or threatened me, whichever you choose to look at it, that if I did not get out everything that I wanted, which is including a chandelier I put in ourselves, they would not take it down. And anything that I could not get out that
throw away.
Monday was left. I could not take out, I could not go back in, and there was a lot of things I left. I fought to get my son's ashes out, plus some things that belong to family, which all of us, I'm sure, we got those things. But I just like to to let you know that this was very recent. And as I say, there was a lot of things left that belonged to me. They were my property, not theirs.
And I was going to, I'm not aware of that specific story, and obviously, everybody's heart goes out to you on that. And I was going to talk about that. I was going to talk about the possessions that are still at the property and how management and their agents handle that. And I thought about making some comments about that. And I thought that would be detrimental if I really went into detail and shed some attacks on how we're basically told to be there at a certain time. If we're not, end of story. But we don't want to look into negotiations like that. We'll figure that out. The most important thing is that these people be made whole. Obviously, we haven't liked the way we've been treated even since the events of September 10th. But hopefully, Wind Management, their subsidiaries, the owner, anyone involved in this case who has exposure, and probably has insurance, hopefully, that they will notify us and do a 180 and treat these people with the compassion and the real sympathy that they should have for what they're enduring. Because I can tell you the stories that I heard are very, very sad. Very, very sad. And I'm not here to get the public to get their sympathy as well. I'm just telling you factual things. And the way they've been treated since September 10th has not been good at all. I gave you one example about the hotel. I mean, how can you tell a person, no, you can only stay there till tomorrow? Then you call the next day. No, one more day. No, one more day. Oh, you got to go to the other hotel. I mean, they really, these people, I don't want to say they were treated like rabble, because that would be unfair, but they were treated, I thought, without the level of compassion they deserved. Yes? Somebody in the back? No? We're all set? Thank you again for coming, and please feel free to send me an email. Hopefully, in the next 2 weeks, I'll have more information as to whether or not, how negotiations are going, if there are any indeed. Thank you very much.